So welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us for what is a Zoom meeting. We're not on a webinar today. We're on a meeting for a community of practice call to really provide an opportunity to dialogue and network amongst people across Canada who charged in their communities with securing housing units and building relationships with landlords. And we'll start off with a land acknowledgement from coast to coast to coast. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of all Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. I am located in Kitchener, Ontario, which is situated on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples, whose presence on these lands continue to this day. And Ian, I don't know if you, from your end, have a land acknowledgement.
It is much the same as yours, Marie.
We're close together. We are in a similar area, both located in Ontario. All right. My name is Marie Morrison. I'm the Director of Built for Zero Canada with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and I am your host for today's webinar. I'm just getting us kicked off. And our facilitator is none other than Ian DeYoung with Org Code Consulting, who is not only an expert on this topic, but an expert facilitator and will very ably and amazingly lead our discussion today. And just wanted to say that on May 4th, we also presented, well, there's a couple of things that have happened before this one just to be aware of. So Ian presented on a webinar on landlord engagement position best practices. And then we followed that up with a community of practice call. And there was so much interest in that community of practice call and people interested in gathering again that we organized the second community of practice call for that purpose. This webinar is being brought to you today from the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, which leads a national movement of individuals, organizations, and communities working together to end homelessness in Canada, and includes the 5 key initiatives you see here. And of course, we are partnering with Org Code Consulting on this one. This binding listing coordinated access support for communities is funded in part by the Government of Canada through the CCI funding stream of Reaching Home. And as mentioned, there were mentioned a few other webinars and community practice calls previously, but this is part of a series of monthly webinars and community practice calls through the Canadian Alliance taking place between the fall of 2019 and March of 2022. The calendar for September to December has now been released, and you can find all the webinars and community practice calls, both those coming up as well as previous ones on the Canadian Alliance Training and Technical Assistance website. Before we jump in, just want to make sure that you're aware of resources available on our website related to this topic. Under program areas, there's a page dedicated to housing, help, and landlords. And what you will find on this page is a number of drop downs, including previous webinars on this topic, resources to support renters, including renters toolkits and self-advocacy resources, information about the Rent Smart certificate program, as well as home takeover resources and flexible funding examples. There are resources to recruit and retrain landlords, again, including toolkits and other resources, information regarding landlord mitigation and repair fund programs, and resources and examples related to head leasing. There are also resources that communities have created to support landlords in this work. So you'll find that there as well, right there. It's not advancing, amazing. Many have identified that they have found this particular guide helpful from 2018. So I just wanted to kind of lift that up and point it out and remind people that it exists and that it is linked on the website that I just mentioned, along with many other resources. And just a few housekeeping items. So today's call is being recorded. We'll send the call out in a few days to all those who registered, but it will also be, as I mentioned, on the Training and Technical website under webinars, under archived webinars. And I believe closed captioning has been enabled, so you're able to activate that if you wish to view that. This is, again, a Zoom meeting rather than a webinar, so you can more easily unmute yourself to speak and join the conversation. And everyone is muted to start. You can put your hand up and use the other sort of functions of Zoom to kind of indicate and share information. And please also use the chat to share ideas and answer questions, etc. All right, so we want to get into some of the sharing and discussion and networking, and we're going to start with some Slido questions. So please get out your phones because we're going to have some surveying via your phones. And so you can see up on the slide, you just can either snap the QRL code, or you can go online to slido.com and then enter in the number there. And our first question, we have about 3 or 4 questions for you, is what role do you hold? So of those on the call today, are you actually a housing locator, landlord engagement worker? However, we know there may also be supervisor, manager folks on the calls of those positions that are interested. There may be funder and system planner type roles, or there may be others. We have about 19 who have entered so far. We've got about 53 people on the call, so we'll just give a few more minutes for people to get set up on the program and start answering the questions. And then someone, yes, just said, I don't understand how to do the Slido. So this is one of those online polls that you do on your phone. So if you pull your phone out and either snap the QRL code or go online on your phone to slido.com, it should prompt you to enter a code, and you enter that number. And then the questions will just come up on your screen, and they're going to come up as I flip through the slides. Oh, we got 34 now, so that's great. More people are chiming in, and we'll just, again, give 1 more minute for people to get comfortable with that before we go on to the other questions. All right. Got about 38 there, so 61%, 62 now on the call are housing locator landlord engagement workers, which is great. We welcome anyone who wanted to join this call, but it is primarily for those folks, again, to be able to network and share and meet one another and share challenges and good practices. All right, going on to the next question. If you are a housing locator landlord engagement worker, how long have you been in this role? Less than a year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 5, 1 to 2. It's a pretty significant number of people, Ian, 2 to 5 years.
More than I would have expected, Marie. I think this is fantastic. It shows that people are staying with it, finding value in the work, and have probably figured out a whole bunch of things that they're willing to share with others.
Yeah. I have had someone say their phone is dead, and I'm very sorry to hear that, but you're also welcome to chime in on the chat if you want to add in that information. That's great. All right, so heading on to the next question. If you are a housing locator landlord engagement worker, how much do you love your job on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is I can't stand it and 5 is I love it? I love watching the polls come in. Yeah, got about 20. I know we got about probably at least 29 who answered the last question. So, oh my gosh, we've got someone who's been in the job for like almost 10 years now.
Wow.
Steve. Okay. We've got a bit of a mix here.
Nobody can't stand it though, Marie. This is positive.
Well, one person.
Oh, no, it's 0%.
Oh, you're right. That was just answer number one. That's not one person. You're right. No one can't stand it. Some people might be struggling. Most people love their job or close to love it. Okay. And part of that, I know that plays into it, is how meaningful your work feels. How much of a difference do you feel you make on a day-to-day basis? Where 1 is I make no impact, and 5 is I'm an integrated and essential part of our team or system to end homelessness. All right, kind of a similar mix there. Right, well, with all that information under our belts, Ian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Marie, and very good day to everybody. Good afternoon to some, good lunchtime to others, happy morning to those who are coming from further west. We gather here today to again continue our conversation around really positive ways that we can make a difference in doing the work of being a housing locator. If you weren't with us last time, things are going to go along 2 streams. I'm going to have a conversation going on in the chat function at the same time that I have a conversation going on live with people. Don't worry, it's not that hard. You suddenly look panicked like I was asking you to multitask. You're housing locator workers. You know how to juggle things. Okay, so here's the first chat function, which is a lot of you locally have created fantastic resources. Guides, lists, ways of documenting your work with landlords, and those sorts of things. So first thing that we want to engage in is an exercise in what I will refer to as legal larceny, stealing each other's great ideas. So if you think your organization or your community has done something really fantastic, I would love for you to put a link to it in the chat function so other people can steal your really good ideas and start to adopt those. Okay. That's the first chat function. Second thing I'd like to do is have an ongoing live conversation. And I have a few topics that'll guide us over the next 45 minutes or so. And I want to start with this idea of attitude of gratitude. If there's any instances where you have had a breakthrough in thinking or processes or relationships that you think could be replicated for others or stimulate their thinking in this space. So I want to give you an opportunity to share some of the really great things that you're doing to get us started, that other people can, I guess, feel a sense of hopefulness in hearing some of the great work that you're doing, and might also inspire some other ideas locally. So if anybody would like to unmute themselves and share some of their awesomeness, this would be a great time. There we go. Jolyn, you're up.
Hi, Ian. So I'm quite new in my role. I started just working on the ground just last month. In that time, I've taken on about 15 clients, and I'm just a team of 1. So I work, I'm the Indigenous Coordinated Access Program Lead in Medicine Hat, Alberta at the Austin Friendship Center. So my role is intended to be more high level and really just making referrals, but it's just me. So I'm a frontline worker right now working as a housing navigator for these clients. So because I'm so brand new in my role, and I actually don't have a social work background, but I am a helper and I am a problem solver. I have heard from so many community partners that there's often a lot of red tape when it comes to dealing with provincial income support and other agencies. And I have just found for myself, just being open and warm and, you know, saying thank you and asking open questions and really showing my appreciation to contacts that I have made in government, saying like, I really appreciate your direction, like open to all suggestions. I have found that making it, you know, clear that I'm leaning on them for support and direction just opens people up, and they're so glad to help. And, you know, please call me if you need more direction. And when in cases, for example, like with landlords or hotel managers, if I've been a bit pushy, I just get shut down right away. So I know that I have to correct that behavior quickly. So I've found that really like asking for clear direction and support in a in a fact-finding mission. People in government and other agencies have been really warm and open to providing that direction and advice.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing and getting us started. The rest of you, let's show some Jolynn appreciation. Feel free to use your reaction button on the bottom and show some Jolynn some love with your reaction buttons. This is the way that we make this participative on an ongoing basis. There we see, there's some love, some clapping. There is feedback. All right, now, is anybody else got an attitude of gratitude moment to share? Something good that's happening?
I just wanted to say something on Jolene's part there, to be honest with you. It's a very good point, because at the end of the day, the folks that we're talking to in the government systems and all that, they have lots of pressure. So, I mean, to come across in an indirect way and you know, not being obviously understanding of what they're going through, with Jolene, you don't get that response that you want. You open up to them, guys, and just, you know, try to be understanding of them and what they're dealing with on their end as well. But obviously trying to help them, you know, realize that we need some things going on this end as well. And I think we could be compassionate about, you know, vice versa and back and forth. Right? I think that's a very valuable thing to do.
Yes. Anybody else want to pick up on Jolynn's comments or want to make their own attitude of gratitude sharing moment? Because sharing is caring. That's right. Those who care share.
And one more thing, we all got to work together in different spaces, different everywhere, in order for to make this work. So it has to be one big team. And if we're going to do that, then obviously we got to, you know, talk to other people and get everybody else involved as well.
Yeah, well, maybe such a great point. Maybe you want to share some thoughts about how we like build some of that team from your perspective. I mean, we kind of got started on this working with government and other partners in a place of like not pushing too hard, really being understanding, but assembling that team. Any thoughts on that?
Well, just from me, my perspective, I just try to deal with the same people every time. I do have, from our perspective, we do have emails and stuff that we could send to certain people in government organizations that kind of, you get the same person that kind of responds back all the time. So you develop that relationship over time, and they're more understanding of what you're dealing with on your end over here, obviously, and you're kind of understanding what they're dealing with. But it's just collaborating and working together to kind of be, you know, to get to the same place.
All right. Last call for attitude of gratitude.
So Ian, I'm sorry, I have no clue how to raise my hand on this screen. I can't find it. So this is Darlene. I'm the housing finder from a program called Street Level Women at Risk in London, Ontario. I have been in this role for 5.5 years. I have learned so much along the way. As Jolynn said, I am not from the social work world. I come from the world of business, and I am a landlord myself, so I understand their perspective, but I truly, truly, truly care about equity and our population and the homelessness. So it's been a very big learning curve. My biggest lesson has been that I'm not there to save anybody, that it is not my journey, it is their journey, and I am just a witness to their journey. That took me a long time, but I am finally there. In some ways, it's made me harder, which I don't love, but I think it's made me more effective in many other ways. So important lesson. One thing that I am extremely grateful for in this insanity of COVID is our program's ability now to do transitional housing, because we are housing first. We've never had transitional as part of our model, even though the true housing first does have transitional housing as part of our model. But with COVID, we have been putting people into hotels, and we have an alliance with a hotel now that is dealing with, they're working with other homeless organizations, not just ours. But the transition of their staff from 1.5 years ago to today is incredible. I had a conversation with their maintenance manager yesterday, who was literally in tears explaining to me why some of the rooms don't have safety latches on them,
because it does not allow her to go in and save their lives. And this woman, who used to be extremely judgmental about anybody with addictions, now carries naloxone. She brings people back all the time. She has the most beautiful attitude towards our participants. She gets to know them. She worries about them. If she doesn't see them in the halls for a couple of days, she now knows to go into their room to make sure that they're not lying on a bed somewhere or on the floor. So just seeing the transition of the judgmental people into being more caring and understanding. And again, I come from a very, very judgmental background. I was a right-wing conservative, judgmental, religious, and to be put into a role where I'm working with street level sex workers, and it just, I went to my interview having no idea what street level women at risk meant. I thought I was going to be working with women with addictions who were at risk of being homeless. I had no idea that it was sex workers, and it was a shock to find out in the interview that that's who I was going to be working with. And I had to take a big, deep breath at that point and think, can I do this? Compared, like, knowing where I come from, can I actually do this work? And I am so grateful that I was willing to take that leap of faith, and they were willing to take that leap of faith for me. So my biggest pet peeve with this whole world of homeless prevention and people who work in this world is we seem to only believe the words meet them where they're at when we're talking about our participants and people who we perceive, I hate to use the word below, but people that we perceive are needy. We don't seem to have that same perspective when we're dealing with people we perceive who are on the higher end of the hierarchy, so landlords. So we're willing to speak in the language of the participants, but we're not willing to speak, or many of us are not willing to speak in the language of the landlords. And the reality is, without landlords, we have nothing. And if we do not speak in a language that makes sense to them and make economic sense to them to work with us, we aren't going to get anywhere. So if the one lesson that I hope we all will take away is that you need to meet everybody where they're at, not just the people that we serve, but also the people that we're working with. So if that means that stupid bureaucrats at ODSP who drive me mental on a daily basis, then we do have to try and make it make sense to them too, so that they'll actually work with us instead of against us. So that's my piece.
With us, not against us. I think we're hearing a lot about team. Let's see some reactions for those of you who are there. I think that I love that both you and Jolene, when you're kind of entering into, were like really clear from the beginning. I'm not a social worker, not a social worker, not a social worker. And so newsflash, they don't teach real estate in social work school. So you could have a whole bunch of skills that you're bringing to the table that it works as a complement to some of the social service world and bringing a different perspective into it. And I think we see opportunity in that. I want to shift directions just a little bit. I want to get a little darker, but with a positive spin. And that is, goodness knows, things don't always go as planned, right? Like guest management, damages, unit takeovers. Oh, heck, we'll just leave it at that. Those are big enough on their own. And we're in a position where some of the landlords, especially those that we've had to work really hard to develop, whether we want to call it a partnership, a business relationship, an engagement strategy, they become very hesitant to ever rent to not only your organization, but any person ever experiencing homelessness ever again. And the good news is that when those hardships happen, they can be moments of great learning, right? Basically learning, that's a mistake, I'm never going to do that again, or this is the thing I would do differently. And so I'd like to position our conversation a little bit towards when there has been less than ideal tenancies. How do you go about saving the relationship with the landlord?
For me, I'm a child and youth care worker, but I did a lot of carpentry and built a lot of houses for 15 years before I did switch careers. So from my perspective, I mean, for a lot of young people we work with, there's always a lot of damages and everything that are associated with, at times, when they move out. So, I mean, for me, I can work with the landlord to make sure that, you know, this is all taken care of, that the damages are all fixed, and work with the young person to do that. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's not just about me going in and taking care of it all for the landlord. I want to have that young person involved to see that this is what involved when, you know, when we have to repair things for landlords. So that's kind of a little bit of an in for me, and having a carpentry background and being able to fix those things. So that kind of helps with my relationships with landlords.
Fantastic. Now we know who to contact to come and help us fix units. This is great. Kidding aside, let's see some reactions if you wouldn't mind. Any other thoughts on mistakes or hardships where you've been able to save the relationship, maybe even strengthen the relationship after something went sideways in a tenancy?
Again, it's Darlene again. I think the key is owning the problem, whether you caused it or not, whether anything you could have done differently could have prevented it. You have to own the problem. And again, one of my favorite lines to my managing director when we first started, when we had a window broken and she was questioning whether it was us or landlord responsible, I basically said, do you want to be right or do you want to keep people housed? So you sometimes have to do things that are gray area of whether or not the landlord should be responsible or you should be. If you're ever questioning that, take responsibility for it, because it will speak volumes with the landlord that you're willing to work with them. Now, I wouldn't just roll over and let them bulldoze you when it's clearly something that they are responsible for. So it's a fine line. But again, if allowing the landlord in to fix that leaky faucet means that they're going to see that your tenant has destroyed the kitchen, just pay for that faucet on your own. In the long run, it's going to be cheaper because you're not going to have to rehouse that person. But again, it's keeping the communication open, making sure you're proactive with landlords. So if you hear about a damage, you tell the landlord. Don't wait for them to tell you, unless it's something you really can fix without them ever knowing. But if it's something that they're going to find out about it, make sure they're finding out about it from you before they find out about it from another tenant, because it makes it far better. They realize that you're in constant contact with your people, that your staff is going in and seeing them. If you're telling them about the damages before they find out on their own, that goes very far. And again, if a tenancy is not working out, don't wait until they have to go to tribunal. Rehouse that person if you can, and move them so that they see that you're working with them, and they'll be far more willing to let you re-rent, if not that unit, another one. And never close a door. Always keep it positive, even if it's a landlord you think is lousy. Make sure you keep that door open, because you never know, 2 years down the road, you might really need them again.
Thank you. Other thoughts specifically around when things go sideways, how to maintain the relationship?
We found a couple times, at least, I've had some good experiences a few times of having the client deeply involved with the landlord, even when it's not been a great relationship, that them stepping into ownership speaks loudly to that landlord on the way out too, because I can build a great relationship with the landlord and try and maintain it through glad handing or being present and all those great things. But having the client step into it actually really kind of solidified that landlord for the next person. That was a really great way.
Can you tell us just a little bit about what that conversation looked like with the client to get them into that space?
Yeah, so we had a client who loves to collect things from the street, and it was getting really, really bad. This was already a landlord that was really conducive to this program, had some family history with addiction, and like really wanted to buy into community. But having her own it, even though like she was going to be evicted, like he did have to go to tribunal, right? Yeah, had done the paperwork and such like that. but having her come with me to go and meet him at his place and have a conversation, like, that's what really turned it. Because I was right. I was pretty much thinking we're going to lose this. This is a great guy, great landlord that wants to help out the community, but we're not going to get a second shot in here. But on the side after, said, like, that was really powerful to talk to her and have that discussion, have her own it. Like, it's not going to change the story, but it makes me want to keep dealing with this situation and know that I'm helping out. And maybe it was an ideal landlord in that one, but it worked out great.
Nice way of thinking about the notion of mutuality in the space, right? Like even exits can be collaborative.
Yes, and I mean, at the end of that one too, it's good for my client. My client's got to deal with a landlord. You got to take ownership. And I know nobody wants to use the successful fail kind of situation, but she's doing a lot better in the next place. And whether that came from taking some ownership and recognizing where it went wrong, there's power in that too.
There is indeed. Thank you for that. Reactions, by all means, don't forget your reactions buttons. They're fun and they'll keep you on your toes. Let's see. Do we have anybody else who would like to share their learning from mistakes, misfortune, strained relationship stories?
I think just like validating the landlord's frustrations and concerns with their damaged unit. I think like landlords take a lot of pride in their units, and when our tenants ruin them, like sometimes they just want to be heard that like, yeah, that sucked. I'm sorry that happened to you. I think that goes a long way.
Okay. And when we have that sort of engagement, which I think comes with some honesty, like the it sucks, I'm sorry it happened to you part of it. There is this opportunity for strengthening the relationship through our ability to express empathy, right? And I think Darlene's made this point as well, as just, you know, the landlord is an important relationship as well as the program participant, not the relationship with the program participant at the expense of the landlords. Always some exceptions for those miserable situations for everybody where we just need to get out, but I'd say large one doing that. No, like big unit takeovers, guest management stuff that you were able to resolve? All right. So now I want to talk about, because we're just going through the themes with this rapid fire around here. I want to talk about landlords as allies in this space, and not just the relationships we have with landlords in the space of individual clients or program participants that we're working with, where I think that relationship is important. But when we start to expand that relationship, examples of that might include things like convening a landlord roundtable to continue to give you advice on your program. Could include doing a survey with landlords to gather their perspectives on renting to the population we serve, what they're looking for, that sort of thing. Other instances is you or someone like you participating in a local landlord association or those sorts of things, which will depend upon the size of the community that you're in, obviously. But in terms of not just establishing those relationships, but sustaining those relationships to have allies, so that if there is an initiative that requires support, let's say a new housing development or new funding for more supports, that landlords could also be voices that go to our municipal councils or our local planning bodies and have a different perspective to share in their support for what it is we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish it. Does anybody have more structured approaches to how they're meeting and engaging with landlords on a regular basis as a system, and not just the one-off, not just the smaller relationships we have on one specific tenancy, but landlords across, looking across the program or across the entire system? Anybody got any insights on that they can share with us?
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
My name's Kathy. I'm here on the East Coast in St. John, New Brunswick. So my role is like I coordinate the BNL process here, but part of my role is landlord engagement. And so one thing that we have been doing here in our community recently is just exactly what you described. So doing a landlord survey. We do have kind of an all-star landlord who's been awesome to work with. We always are fortunate to have one of those. And he's been really providing some great insight into how to design a survey, how to engage landlords in participating in that survey. So through that process, we've been able to really gather some great data and understand what landlords need from us and what would benefit them moving forward and kind of encourage them to participate in the program. And then another thing that we're working on right now is between now and Christmas, we're hoping to do what we're calling in from the cold. So instead of opening an out of the cold shelter in our community, we're hoping to rapidly house about 30 individuals from shelters and from Sleeping Rough. So as part of that strategy, we're hoping to structure a media campaign and actually highlight our Gordon, who is our amazing landlord, and have him kind of do a profile on social media and engage him in media and press releases as well. So hoping to partner up with him and show how he works alongside us and kind of highlight the great work that he's doing, but also have him act as a spokesperson to hopefully recruit some more landlords. So I'd be happy to share any kind of media documents out with the group once we have that press release going moving forward. So I'm really excited. We had some good communications talks about this today, so it's really, really exciting.
Let me ask you this, Kathy. Gordon, is that this landlord's name that's pretty exceptional?
Yeah, Gordon.
Go Gordon. Let's get some reactions for Gordon.
He's a rock star.
This is something that I love, right? I mean, when we showcase the contributions of people, it can get to a place where other people also feel compelled to take action or to learn more, right? And to break down some of that. And the Gordons are kind of exceptional, right? I mean, there's not a lot of landlords who are like your Gordon, no. But when we find a Gordon, it can feel magical. Like it's a bit like finding the unicorn. And you're like, oh my God, they're real. Sidebar, did you know that the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland? True story. But when I think about the Gordons of the world and the unicorns, there's some people who might think, geez, that's too good to be true. So how do we balance some of the expectation with the enthusiasm that a Gordon brings to it? Or at this point, you're like, to heck with like massaging this in any way, let's just let Gordon be enthusiastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to kind of some of what Darlene was saying, and also some of what Jolene was saying is just, you know, the relationship has been great with Gordon, and Gordon is a unicorn, but he's also a human being, and there have been really, really challenging situations that have come up where Gordon has called us up and been like, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore, guys. Like, you know, and he's been ready, especially at the height of the pandemic, to drop the ball and say, I don't want to work with you guys anymore. So I think, yeah, certainly he's amazing, and he's in it for definitely out of the goodness of his heart. But at the same time, there are a lot of really challenging things happen. So I think it just comes back to him sharing the great highlights of what he's been able to do, but also sharing the reality and the challenges and being really frank with other landlords and saying, yeah, this is challenging in these ways, but also it's great in these ways. So kind of balancing that.
Great, thank you. And I'm just taking a scan through the chat function here, and I noticed Steve put something interesting. He put, 2 of our long-standing landlords had fires recently. We are sending fruit baskets. And this sort of like building the relationship and sustaining the relationship, sometimes that's small stuff. And I know that other communities intentionally have you know, once or twice a year where housing workers jointly sign thank you cards. Just that ability to say to some landlords, like, thank you for going above and beyond. And not just the big property management firms, but you know, some of those like small family operated 1 or 2 unit sort of people, just making sure appreciation and gratitude is known. I think that can get across enthusiasm as well. Anybody else got a Gordon that they want to tell us about?
I do. So I have actually 2 Gordons, but unfortunately both of them are management companies rather than owners. So the problem we keep coming up with both of them, so they will pretty well take anybody that I bring them, but they keep having their properties sold. So all of these lower end properties that they're willing to put our people into keep getting sold, and then the new landlords are not so great, or they're kicking everybody out because they're going to renovate the building or whatever. Like we've got that situation right now. The new landlords are actually quite lovely, but they are offering cash for keys and they're emptying the building out. So hopefully I will be working with them in the future. Once they renovate, they're taking some of our people back. But there's the other thing too, is I only fought for certain people to return because I knew that the other ones would get in trouble as soon as they return and get kicked out again. So there was no point in ruining a new landlord relationship for people that we know are trouble because they've got traffic or they're selling drugs from their unit or they're destroying the place. So out of the 9 units in that building, we're only having 4 return. The other 5, well, sadly, one of ours passed before the cash for keys could be exchanged, but the other 5 are, or the other 4 are moving out and not returning. So again, it's kind of that you build these relationships, they're great, and then they sell the properties on you. So, but we do have 2 absolutely extraordinary. They will literally give me keys, say, go and rent it. I'll take whoever you bring me, just take care of the trouble.
There we go. I'm also just following along in the chat here, seeing about Christmas cards, inviting to AGMs, sending a $10 Timmy's card along. These are some great ideas if we're keeping track of what's going on in the chat function. Any other ideas about sustaining and building the relationship with landlords as allies?
I guess I'll jump in. Sorry. This is Karina from Mission Services. So I worked as an early intervention worker, and part of that piece was connecting with landlords and building that relationship. And I also, now I'm a supervisor here, and so I work closely with our Housing Up program. And the one thing that we found, and I found as well, in terms of maintaining relationships with landlords, was to kind of have a mixed badge. So we do deal with a fairly large property management company. And we also have rapid rehousing, early intervention, and what our clients do, what we know about our clients. We can kind of give them a good taste of rehousing, kind of give lower acuity is like to build that relationship. Maybe give them a couple of guys that are maybe under like the low acuity bar so that they have more of a positive experience. And again, oftentimes when we do have communication with landlords, it tends to be when things are going wrong. So what we can do to collaborate and build partnerships is to connect with them when things are going right, what's going good, and reminding our landlords why they want to be working with us. Because we're always reacting. So it's about being proactive in those situations. Going back to my previous point, I would say that, yeah, we give them a mixed pot. So yes, they might have one challenging client, but because they've had positive experiences with lower acuity individuals, they might be more open or receptive to maybe higher acuity individuals. But yeah, that's what I have to say.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts on sustaining relationship building allies? I think we've heard some really interesting ideas that come across, some of which might be completely applicable to your community, some of which are not, but love to hear 1 or 2 more if there are any.
Just jumping in. So I know of about 5 rental property management companies in Medicine hat here. I've been able to make warm relationships and inroads with 2 of them so far. So I will call them up and say, I have a mom fleeing abuse. She's got 3 kids and 1 on the way. Do you have a unit that's appropriate for her, rather than me try to comb through so many lists and spend time on Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace to say, do you have a place that's appropriate for her? And then they feel involved a little bit, maybe like a little bit like a savior complex in that moment. But, you know, it gives them a chance to feel like they're a real partner in problem solving, you know, and saving this one family. Although I know, and Darlene said that that's not their job, and I'm sure that they're well versed in that it's not their responsibility. But I have found that by involving them and saying, hey, like, I have this family that's just lost their home, do you think you have something appropriate? It's a warmer transaction, and I found that they've been receptive to that each time.
So it's like an invitation almost, as opposed to a demand. That's very interesting. I can see how that changes the nature of the conversation, for sure. I'm just reading here in the chat, we are head leasing units in our company name. Our participants then occupy the unit. We find this helps put us in the middleman position. The landlord knows we are responsible for following the terms of the lease, regardless of the participant's situation or behavior. All right. If there's no more on the sustaining building allies, I want to shift to the last theme of today. And this is really going to, I think, continue to help us uncover when colleagues in different parts of the country might have figured some stuff out that we just haven't, as well as maybe realizing that there's a few issues where it doesn't matter if you go coast to coast to coast, they're just not resolvable yet. And so this last part here is going to be in your position, in your role, are there unmet needs for landlords or requests made of you that you just cannot, that you think are reasonable, and like not the unreasonable ones, but the reasonable requests the landlords might make of a position like yours that we just can't meet? So unmet needs of landlords is really the focus that I want to put on there, or requests of your position that you just cannot meet.
So from our perspective, a lot of the requests, I mean, from a landlord's perspective, is they're worried about damages. Who's going to pay for damage? I mean, obviously with the damage deposit, the young person that provides to, you know, give to the landlord will not cover at times the amount of damages that are occurred. So that's one of the main things I get from landlords. But now since here in St. John's, we have starting the program where some funding is available for the landlords if there's missed rent payments, or if there's any, lots of damages, thousands of dollars worth of damages. We do have a program in place now that we just started the last couple of years to try to help landlords with that. But I mean, for us in our housing market right here now in St. John's, we are limited to what we have because of one, we are seeing a very low rate, but landlords are obviously capitalizing on that in a way of raising rents as well. So from a financial perspective, it's hard to find funding when that, landlords are capitalizing on the tendency or the rate, occupancy rate, and then they're driving the rent up.
Unmet needs or requests of you that you just can't meet.
Hi, I'm Nina here in Whitehorse, and we have a very similar problem. Like, there's a very low vacancy rate. So sometimes landlords will want to work with us, but they expect like a very quick turnaround, which of course, when you're doing the matching process and you have to involve everyone at the table, it could take a lot longer. And then, with housing first principles, if the first person doesn't take it, it can stretch out. So a lot of landlords are expecting that we cover the rent to hold the units, or else they'll just rent it to somebody else in a different manner and we lose that relationship. So that's kind of been a struggle for us. Like, when is a line too much? Like, how much do they expect us to take on?
Yeah, and I think we heard on the last call, I want to say New Brunswick, but I could be wrong, some work that had been happening in that way to try and like sustain the relationship with the landlord while the occupancy was being sorted out, like which person was going to get the offer. But I do think that is a challenge, right? That do we want there to be choice on the part of program participants? But that can also delay the lease up process. And I can certainly see the landlord's frustration at times saying, well, why would I work with you if I can have someone else in faster and improve my revenue quicker? Other particular challenges, unmet needs of landlords or unrealistic expectations of you.
Sorry, it's Darlene again. Definitely, we have landlords who expect that we can do things that are not legal, like enter units without the permission of the tenant, or get them out of there faster than a tribunal process can work. So behaviors like stopping the drug dealing, stopping the traffic. So yeah, landlords do expect that we can do more than we can do. And again, it's not reasonable, but we do try our best to make sure that we're at least perceived as doing something. Like, don't just throw up your hands and say, I can't do that. You have to at least show that you're doing stuff. And if push comes to shove and the landlord's really right and your participant is clearly in the wrong and they're still digging in their heels, if you have to support a landlord to tribunal, I believe you should, in order to keep that relationship. Now, you have to believe that what the tenant is actually doing is wrong, and agree that they really should not be living there anymore. But if you have to support to a tribunal, I think that's the right thing to do.
And have you offered support of the tribunal to a landlord before, Darlene?
We've offered it. We've never had to get there. So we've only had in our almost 6 years of running, we've only had 2 tribunals, one of which we initiated and we won. The other one, they took her to tribunal. We weren't told. She didn't tell us. They didn't tell us. We didn't find out until the sheriff was there. So, and again, and she left a ton of damages, and that landlord 4 months later tried to come after us for the damages. And I dug my heels in and I said, no, we're not paying for those, because they had the opportunity at every step of the way to involve us and they chose not to. So if they had, even up until the point of the eviction, if we had known about it, we probably would have gone in and done those damages. But at that point, my manager actually wanted to pay for it. And I said, no, it's not worth it, because they weren't going to work with us again. And quite honestly, they weren't a landlord that were valuable to keep. So we didn't pay for that one.
Well, and I think you've also raised a really interesting point, right? Like sometimes we realize through these negative situations, the question before, that there's some relationships we just don't want. Like
Right.
we may have a scarcity of housing, but a particular landlord or their ideology or their business practices lead us to a place where we just say, this isn't a good fit for the values of our program, the values of our organization, or the people that we serve. And I think those are really challenging. But I would like to think that all of us, for example, try to avoid slumlords, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some rougher around the edges buildings that actually are really good landlords and rough around the edges buildings. But that's going to be different than I treat my people like crap, I kick them out without following any process or legal or laws, and basically treating everybody like crap in the process. And we don't want those headaches. I think we have time for one more unmet need of landlords. I see one in the chat function, non-smoking clients. Any other unmet needs or unreasonable requests?
Ian, can I just comment to say thank you for saying so, that it's okay to acknowledge that there are relationships that you just don't want to move forward with or pursue preserving. I had a really aggressive hotel manager on the phone yesterday when I was looking for a smoking unit for a client. And I mean, it was only a 2-minute phone call, but I felt traumatized afterward. And, you know, like I'd done something wrong trying to connect, and I was so turned off. And then the next phone call I made to the next hotel, she said, oh, certainly do not ever call that lady again. And I guess she's quite aggressive to all who call. So thank you for saying that, because I felt that yesterday.
Yeah, I think I think there are times where the relationship, any relationship that we enter into, can be not just negative, but border on or even become abusive, right? And in terms of how people treat each other, or that people can be very violent with their words at times that I think are inappropriate. And then this ideologically, I think that I'm not asking landlords to understand everything about homelessness. I'm not even asking them to necessarily be great people. Just don't be a jerk. Like, don't go out of your way to say or do things that are going to be problematic in the relationship with the tenant. And I think when you see some of that power dynamic play out, there can be a hesitancy. There was one landlord in a community in Northern Ontario that we worked with. You know, he came across as the nicest, most community-friendly guy, but like if you were behind on his rent, like he essentially sent his goons to go shake people down. And it's like, I don't care how nice you are in public meetings and all the nice things you say for people. As soon as you go down that road of like enforcer, tough guy, I don't want to. Like, our values aren't aligned. We're done.
So Ian, along that line, I find a lot of my role, especially with smaller landlords, and I have a couple of landlords that are new Canadians, and they really have no idea what the law is, and they also have no idea what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. So I have one landlord who will just say to everybody, that person's crazy, or that person's nuts. And it's like, you can't speak about people that way. So a lot of my role is educating landlords of what they can and cannot do. And I have to put up with a lot of very borderline ignorant and ignorant behavior, and try and educate them in a gently, in a positive way. But yeah, that is a lot of my role.
Yeah, I think any landlord where we can provide that education for the betterment of the people we're serving, the better. But my goodness, it can be taxing and time consuming, and at times frustrating, and well, certainly iterative. People don't always see it and get it the first time. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for participating in the community of practice dialogue today. We don't have time to go deeper into another question. I'm just going to bring Marie back and see if she has any final thoughts that she would like to share with the group. Marie, anything you wanted to say? If you are talking right now, you're on mute.
Oh yeah, I was totally talking. Thank you so much, Ian, for pointing that out, and thank you for facilitating, and thank you everyone for joining. I do want to just take us to just 5 quick questions that we would love you to answer regarding the session today. Here we go. I am just launching a poll, so this should just show up on your screen. And you can answer that as we go along. And I don't know, Ian, while that's happening, any other closing remarks or thoughts to make?
Yeah, I think that it continues to be an opportunity where, I mean, it's the sort of thing that we may want to engage in again, you know, another 4 or 6 months from now, just to check in. I think that this is a space of ongoing innovation. I think that we are continuing to learn ways of sustaining and building relationships to the betterment of the people that we serve, to the betterment of our organizations, and that our own skill sets continue to evolve and develop in this space. And as a community of practice, I think that there's a great gift that we've been given to have other allies from across the country, where maybe from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, it's not always completely plug and play, but it's the ideas that stimulate new ways of thinking or problem solving. And sometimes I know these calls are also just when you hear people talk about things, you're like, oh, thank goodness I'm not the only one who has struggled with this or has thought about that. So there's assurance in that place. I'd encourage you to continue to try and stay connected with other people throughout the country, maybe not the entire cohort, but when we start to develop those relationships, if you're open to other people reaching out and asking you questions from time to time, feel free to put your name, your job title, and your email address in the chat function before we go, in case some other people want to reach out and ask specific questions on a go-forward basis. But I certainly love the opportunity to facilitate these. I'm very grateful to the Canadian Alliance for the work that they do in the space of bringing practitioners together and the great work that they are doing to continue to lead to a place where homelessness is rare And if it does occur, it's brief and non-recurring.
Great. Thank you, Ian. Those were amazing closing remarks. And certainly we're seeing like more and more of these positions coming up in communities across the country. And so new folks, and it's also just super refreshing to see folks who've now been in these roles for a number of years and sharing your ideas with others. And just really, again, thank everyone for being on the call today. And I hope you have a good rest of your Friday, depending on where you are, and a wonderful weekend. And please keep up all of your great work. Thanks so much.
Bye for now.